I'm going to share. Hi, Felix.
Hi, everyone.
Sure. Can you all see this thing? Should be saying, oh, wait, you probably can't see it now.
No, it's visible.
Claims to be paused. Now you should see it. Current meeting. Okay. Let's see. What was that? So, let's see. Any updates on these action items? This already happened. This happened. This happened, and I crossed it out already. This happened, and this happened.
I think the 66740 for me was also a duplicate of one you deleted above. Maybe double check that.
Okay. Very good. So let's take a look at the. There's been some new activity here. Start with that. Okay. So I filed a meeting proposal, and there was a new MCP. I want to talk briefly, although we can go over. I guess it relates to what the meeting proposal I filed. I have your faces over here on the side. It's going to look really weird. Okay, let's do it this way. So so first of all, I filed this meeting proposal just 2 seconds ago, which I didn't have time to write much, and I'll write a little more. I have some more concrete thoughts here. But this came out of a conversation Josh and I were having. But I would like, ideally this week, if we have time, to talk about more, kind of follow up on the discussions around the new procedures and the talk about LangTeam path to membership. In some ways we could manage that. But one of the things I want to talk about is, okay, we're starting to get some major change proposals. We need to think about how we process them and how we're going to answer them. And one of the goals of the whole idea of MCP was to sort of force us to ask the questions and sometimes answer no, or if we don't have bandwidth, or if we do, basically to be a bit more honest and clear about what we are doing. Or maybe honest is the wrong term. I think we're always honest, just clear. So I bring this up to point out that we have these 3 groups. So far, we haven't gotten back to anybody who's filed an MCP, which seems suboptimal to me. We had talked about 2 ways to answer, or 3 maybe. One is to say, no, we're not going to do that at this time because nobody's excited enough or whatever reason. Another was to say that we do have interest in doing it, but the person who is interested in it has kind of got their hands full right now and doesn't really have time to follow up, and does expect to have time, I think, in the next, I don't know, right? You should be able to sort of, not like years. I think it should be something feasible. And the final would be, yes, I want to pursue this right now with you, right? Which may or may not be a huge time commitment. So if anybody here wants to signal that they do have time, or they don't have time, but they are interested and they think they would have time maybe after the summer or something like that, or they can sort of identify when they might have time, then I think we should talk about how to do that. I think you would just self-assign and leave a comment, and I would basically move it over here to this short list of stuff we might do, or stuff we're waiting on, that we're in queue to do next. And we could discuss exactly what else we want to do in the meantime. While that's in the short list, I don't know if it should have its own Zulip stream so that the people who, maybe the LangTeam member is not able to interact very much, but other people want to keep pushing on it in the meantime, that seems okay. Although at that point it's almost a project group, so maybe that also doesn't make sense. So yeah, I guess that's all I had to say, just to point out that we have these. I would like to kind of start to answer people. One of the things in this list is this one, which was me saying something I would like to do, but I want volunteers. I haven't really thought about how we should advertise this. I have been thinking I want to do more. I've kind of given up on LinkedIn blog posting, and I plan to change that by writing up the review safe transmute meeting. Just write a short blog post saying, "Hey, this happened. It was cool. Typic is cool. Here's a movie you can watch." I could imagine us using that opportunity. Like if we had regular blog posts, we might advertise, what's happening with the major change proposals, keep people abreast. These things were filed. There's some help wanted requests. If you're interested in getting involved, this might be something to pick up. I should actually ask myself if I really have time to work with this, but that's a separate question. Any thoughts or comments on that? Shall we move on?
I wanted to expand on the notion of assigning yourself in the interests of like expressing interest. I think part of the goal here would be, let's try to provide more visibility into our respective backlogs. So if you already have something going on, and this is more, I'm tagging this because I'm interested, then we can tag it like that and then leave it in, nobody's working on this right now, but we are generally in favor as a column here. And separate from that, even if you don't have something you're currently serving as liaison for, it's still possible to tag something as being interested, but not actually have it be active yet. So I think it's important that we maintain this distinction of who would be willing to be a liaison given appropriate bandwidth and actually having bandwidth.
Is the intention here that when one is interested but doesn't have bandwidth currently, that you still would self-assign it, or is that not the case?
Yes, that was the intention. Is there might be 4 people who are self-assigned because they're all willing to liaise, and then when one of them gets bandwidth and wants to slot something new in their queue, if they take something they've already self-assigned, remove the other people assigned to it and put it in the active list.
I mean, I think they wouldn't, or I think we would probably mark it as accepted, close it, and make an issue representing the group that we like.
Sure, yeah.
They would move to the active list and be assigned at that point, and that's a different
process
assignment in
step
that case.
aside, yeah, though.
Okay, the crucial thing I want to make sure I understand is just that just because something here is assigned, has an assignee attached, does not in any way imply that it's currently being worked on.
I think it depends on what it is. Yeah. A proposal having an assignee attached is an intent to work on it. And I'm perfectly, also if you feel this is too confusing, we could use some other scheme like labels, but assignees they show your face and they're kind of nice. But yeah, the idea was if you assign yourself to a proposal, it's saying, I want to see this go forward. But you can leave a comment clarifying the timeline you have in mind. And I think a short list is totally fine. And we'll not immediately is a valid timeline. And we would move that over to a deferred column or something. Pursue it. If it stays there too long, we probably want to talk about that too. But does that make sense?
Yeah, and I assume also that there are backlogged RFCs that we had previously liaisoned with but aren't proposed as major change proposals that probably should be encoded as major change proposals. Then we thus probably should encourage those RFCs to file one.
Yeah, I think that sounds right. I think this project board is incomplete and doesn't contain all the old, either old or current activity, and I sort of think it should. So, whether that means creating an MCP, or we can add arbitrary things on here. So I could add like I have here actually an existing RFC in the active projects column. We could add RFCs in the shortlist column if we don't want to force people to make issues. But I think it's probably good, if it's not something we're actively working on, it's probably good that it tries to get into the new system so that we have a central list and we can publish GitHub queries that are more usable and stuff like that.
But at the same time, we don't want to just blanket convert all the existing RFCs because some of them may not even have active people working on them.
I would want to be a little more selective. Mm-hmm. I would like at some point to sit down and the way I imagined it is that we would do some through the new system until we're kind of happy with how it works before we start doing this. And then we would go over those and like pick the ones that seem most promising and encourage them to open a new MCP, but or do it ourselves, but like and move it through that system, or just make a group. We don't necessarily have to make an MCP. We could just make a group directly, right? If we know we want to, but go that way. But not. I don't want to force everyone to do it if there's no viable path forward. It just seems like silly. So, okay, let's get on with our. I guess any final comments on that topic, and then I'll move to. All right, active items. So we have this instruction set attribute. The RFC, last I heard is, I guess it's in FCP now, at least based on the labels. So that's fine. We'll check back on it next time. Tracking tainted expressions and generally stabilizing the exclamation point. I've been talking to Blitzer a little bit. I'm not sure. We'll see where that goes. I'm still kind of looking for someone to implement that. On these topics, some of these that are kind of stalled, I'm thinking of making another column for like stalled projects, just to recognize that distinction. I think this coherence bypassed by an indirect impl might be a good example of a stalled project, which I do want to see us pursue, and I just haven't had the time to get back to it. But stalled ones, we good to call them out because that might be a place for somebody else who hasn't time to pick it up. I don't know. All right. No update here unless anyone has any comments on coherence can be bypassed, but project safe transmute. So we had a meeting. Is there much to say beyond that? I don't know. Any updates for this?
I think that on the basis of that meeting, people are proceeding forward with, okay, what's the next step? And I think the question is going to be, what can we do to unblock ongoing work in that area? We expressed some general interest of this sounds about right. You know, you're going in the right direction. The question is now, what is the how much further should they go before checking back and saying, here's where we're at?
Right, so particularly the idea was the goal of taking the typic approach of having libraries kind of model, or having libraries that define safe transmute, experimenting with like different ways. And that's kind of the goal, right? So it seemed like we were kind of in conclusion that the next step was probably to prepare an RFC with that.
Okay.
Like once we know what those steps are, figure out what they are and make an RFC for them. Does that sound right?
Sounds right.
I think, and specifically, like, what was the, I don't remember the typic author's name off the top of my head right now, but suggestion was to introduce some marker traits, or one suggestion was to introduce some marker traits for that different libraries can use. Something like that. Okay.
The other thing I remember there was having that intrinsic or auto-implemented trait, whatever it is, that would enable the library team to go and figure out what this should actually look like to users, but that from a Lang perspective, it was mostly just exposing some internal thing so that that was even possible.
Right, but I think the idea was we didn't think we were ready to necessarily expose the intrinsic that makes this definition, but rather to expose the traits that libraries would implement. But okay, this is more of a library concern. Another option might be to include some intrinsic constfm or other function for determining when types are equivalent, etc. Something like that. Okay. Inline assembly, any updates here? What's the status of the RFC?
I know a couple more people checked their boxes. I'm checking right now what the status is. Oh, the status is that it will be in final comment period for the next 3 days. It has been in final comment period for a week.
Okay. We post. Very good. There's not much else to say, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's firmly on track. I don't think that we're likely to need to deal with it further unless either an issue comes up or months and months from now we are on a path to thinking about stabilizing. I would suggest, just as we did when the RFC was in discussion originally, that because of the scope and impact of this feature, that it needs to go through several stable releases worth of evaluation and ecosystem usage and demonstrated benefit and similar before we consider stabilizing. I think it would be good to see if we can get it stabilized by, say, the 2021 edition, but we certainly should not be trying to stabilize it in the next month or 2 or 3.
Yeah. So the next step would be for this to go through a validation period of several releases, at least, to validate the design. No rush to stabilize.
Right. I would love for it to hit the 2021 edition, but I don't feel like it needs to be done in the next 3 months to 6 months in order to do that.
To be clear, I'm out of the loop about timing here. The 2021 edition might end up being made at the end of 2021, right? We don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. I think that we generally gave the guidance or have talked about the idea that if a feature isn't even spec'd by the end of 2020, start of 2021, it probably shouldn't be going into the 2021 edition. But something that has an accepted RFC and implementation is being experimented with in 2020, then stabilizing that in the 2021 edition seems pretty reasonable. Hand wave, hand wave.
So yeah, I mean, I think stabilizing is kind of independent, like can happen whenever we feel it's ready, right? I think the main thing was we don't want to be going and making last minute migrations and stuff. If there's any migrations required, those should be, but this doesn't have that issue. So. Okay, so let's keep moving. I'm gonna post a link here. So for the FFI Unwind group, there's a pending RFC. We were blocked on making some edits. I think those edits have been made. And according to Kyle, at least, the RFC is ready for FCP. I hope to propose it later today. Need someone from Lang team to review and FCP merge. I don't think there are any other major updates. The main thing is we decided that, I think we clarified that indeed it's not only the C unwind ABI, but that other ABIs as necessary may have unwind variants like system unwind. And that this didn't seem like it was a big deal. In particular, it seems like this doesn't require all of WinAPI to change, which is good. Okay. Const evaluation, I don't know if there are any updates.
Sorry, one quick follow-up on the FFI on one thing. I would say, based on some of the discussion that we had, if there were an ABI where unwinding is just an innate part of the ABI, we might want to consider whether that should be the default. But for the most part, since system and Win API and all of the other APIs we're aware of don't have that as a consideration, that there isn't an innate everybody uses unwinding,
I'm
then
not sure what you mean.
so
Like,
if
I think all the
hypothetically-
ABIs actually do have an innate everybody uses unwinding consideration. And we chose to deviate from that and require you to say it explicitly. There is in practice, people don't do it. Aren't necessarily.
I think what I was
aware.
suggesting is, like, if hypothetically some ABI like standard call was specifically used primarily by functions whose error handling was always some sort of structured exception handling based on unwinding, then it wouldn't be very useful to have a non-unwind variant of that. And we would talk about, hey, should the default be this so we don't break a ton of people? We don't have such an API that we're aware of. So I think it makes sense that all other ABIs follow the same pattern of default no unwind. If you want unwind, add it.
Right. I guess, like, for example, in Windows, it's quite normal to unwind, but only in the event of sort of only the forced unwind case, which we already said can still occur.
Exactly.
However, what I would say probably in the case like you're describing is that we probably still want to name it foo unwind for consistency.
Quite possibly, yes.
Even if there's no foo.
That's a good call, yes. Because this would have to be some new ABI we haven't yet talked about. And if we're introducing something new, then by all means, let's include the token unwind in it.
Yeah, that seems fine. Okay. Const evaluation, I don't know of any updates. I'm gonna just leave it. Okay. Very good. These are done. Let's get to the rest. Exciting stuff. P-high issues. These are all old. Is that right? Yes, these are all old. No major updates that I know of. Nominated PRs. None. It's beautiful. Nominated issues. Interesting. So we're on issue 68354. How do I close tabs to the right? There we go. Why was this nominated? To discuss stabilization. I feel like we could nominate. I don't know. Anyone have thoughts on stabilizing the combination of by move and by ref? I think the main reason we didn't used to support this was the borrow checker had limitations. We've pretty much lifted those limitations with the new borrow checker. Is there any reason not to support it that anyone's aware of?
I would like to read this because I'm not entirely familiar with it.
Okay, let me start.
Thank you.
So you're not sure what feature we're even talking about, Josh? Is that the case?
I suspect that I might. It's that I want to swap the knowledge back in.
It would be something like this.
This is making more sense.
This did not used to be permitted. And it still requires a feature gate because you're simultaneously creating a reference to one side and moving from the other.
Right, okay. Yeah, assuming there have been no issues observed with this in practice and assuming that people are actually using it, so it's not just we have no issues because there is no usage, then I don't see any reason why we couldn't stabilize this if it's working.
I don't know if people are using it, but I have no reason to think they're not using it. I mean, I guess it's a little harder to do with. No, you can do it with default binding modes also. It's a little bit harder to get in this situation, but not so difficult. You could do something like this.
This is definitely in the category of things that people would expect to work, and it was kind of surprising when it didn't back when we first discussed this.
Yeah, so it's not specific to ref because, like in this case, X, or I'm being really inconsistent. In this case, X is by ref.
Right.
Okay, I'm going to propose that someone prepare a stabilization report.
Yep. Sounds good.
If I can only type.
So there are already test cases in the repository. Could we specifically say showing some like interest from the ecosystem or some usage from the ecosystem?
Would you put that as a prereq?
Not as a prereq so much as if there is some, please link to it. If there isn't any, please let us know. The standard caveats apply. I mean, it's a nightly feature, so it would have to be some project that's willing to use nightly for a feature like this. But I'm still curious if somebody has actually used the feature gate in the wild.
Yeah.
But since it's feature gated, then we ought to be able to at least search for, you know, the feature gate name.
Yep, that's plausible, I guess. Yeah, that's a good point. Okay. Cool. Okay, next issue. I guess that's the end of the nominated issues. Nominated RFCs, none. RFC bot pending list. It's getting better, getting shorter. And here's one that I haven't seen yet. Do we want to look at any of these? I guess we can.
I think that one is worth a very brief mention. It is a lang libs joint one, so it's one of those where it's good for us to take a moment to unblock things. But the premise of this one was that in the compiler, in the standard library rather, we took an intentionally very conservative approach when using const generics to implement things like trait impls for slices of various lengths. And so there is a length at most 32 limit of, well, we're never going to do more than slices of fixed length 32 so that we always have the ability to.
I see. So is this, this is removing so that we now support impls for any arbitrary length?
That's strange. Zoom keeps kicking me out of the meeting and making me rejoin, and I don't know why. So yeah, we took that conservative approach so that you could always drop in manual impls or macro generated impls up to a certain fixed size. And if we accept this PR, we are committing stably to the notion that we will always have enough of const generics available, at least in nightly, to the compiler and library itself, standard library itself, to be able to implement things for arbitrary sized slices. That doesn't mean we're committing to stable const generics or to any particular semantics. It just means we are stably providing a set of impls for any arbitrary slice size, which means we always have to have a means of doing so in the future, whatever that means might be. I think that's reasonable. I think that that's not a full commit for we will always have const generics and we will have them available stable.
Yep.
But I think the idea that we have some feature available for STID to use is reasonable.
Agreed. Okay. Any thoughts on that? Anyone else?
It seems reasonable. I do agree with the point that maybe we're getting to the point where we should just stabilize some subset, but that doesn't have to block this question.
There is actually in this issue a related opened issue that is linked for let's figure out a subset of const generics that might be stabilizable sooner. Things like you can't do expressions, you can't do computations, you can just take a parameter you were given and use it exactly. And that would be a subset that may be easier to stabilize, where you can't say n+1 and you can't necessarily say I'm using the size of this other thing as computed in the type system as my slice length, but you can take an n you were given and put it in the n of a slice. And that's enough to implement this, for example. So it would be kind of a conservative const generics that we might be able to stabilize sooner.
Min const generics?
Basically, yeah. So I'm enthusiastic about this personally. I think it's a good step, and I'm glad that somebody's actually taking the time to say, what does it take to unstick this?
Okay. It's also worth, there's some, let me see. So LCNR linked to some related Zulip conversation. People can read up on their leisure, I guess. Okay. I would like to point out this target feature. This is the question of whether SIMD, so next order of business, I guess, 73631, whether or not SIMD, whether or not closures inside a function should be able to assume the target features hold. In other words, once you enter a target feature function, do we know for all time that you can't take that target feature back? Josh, I think you were in favor of this. Oh, I see you checked your box. Okay.
I have, yes.
Yeah, so I just want to point out it's here.
Right. I want to state for the sake of completeness, the assumption that this makes is that once you've run code that is part of a target feature function, then you will always be able to use that target feature, so you should be able to make a closure that uses that feature and pass it around. The caveat to that is, in theory, you could have some complicated architecture where, say, you have asymmetric multiprocessing with big cores and little cores, you know, either ARM or Intel or other implementations of that concept, where some of the cores have a particular processor feature and some of the cores do not. So theoretically, you could have to deal with that. That would break a huge amount of code already in the wild, not just Rust code, but C code and other people's code that just assumes you can check CPU ID once or the equivalent once and then run code. And so any introduction of such a mechanism, there's been discussion in, say, the Linux kernel community, for example, of you could ask for an explicit lease to use scoped features, and you have to say, I'm willing to do that, or you don't get those features at all, and you get instead the subset that runs on every processor. So the notion would be, if, you know, this processor has AVX, but this one doesn't, or this processor has, I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of the ARM vector extension, but the same kind of concept, then you would have to ask for it, and then you will only run on the big cores until you stop asking for it. And that would be the kind of thing that would be necessary to avoid breaking code that makes assumptions like this. If that were ever done, then yes, we'd need some additional mechanism if we wanted to track, oh, you shouldn't keep around closures that assume that you can use this target feature after you have dropped the lease that says you can use this target feature. There are ways we could make that work more safely without keeping it for the duration of a process. But at the same time, I don't think that we should block our current simplistic architecture, like something that works for the majority of cases for the majority of people, on the particular implementation details of some future CPU architecture that doesn't necessarily even have this property yet.
That seems reasonable to me, as long as it gets on the UB list of, even if you don't use anything from the target feature, you've still committed to having it if you've called
Right.
that.
Right. So doing something to take a target feature away from your process after having called some code that uses the target feature would become UB until further notice, yes.
I missed what Scott said, sorry. But I assume it was something, it was about, well, can you repeat it, Scott?
Basically just that we have to make sure it's on the UB list.
Okay, yeah.
For the
Yeah, it seems like I was pondering about it. I mean, the general premise we've had is that it's unsafe to enter into a target feature section when you enter into a target feature specific thing, the unsafe obligation on your part is to prove that that feature is available. And what we are kind of changing, I guess what you would have had before is that you must prove that it's available for the duration of the function. And what we're now saying is you have to prove that it's available for the duration of the function or anything that escapes from that function, which
Right.
in the case where, which is easy to do in the case where you are not in this asymmetric multiprocessing setup, because you don't need to know what escapes from the function because it never changes. In the case where you are in that setup, then it becomes more difficult. You would actually have to know the function definition or like know something about what might escape from it.
Right.
Which either means we have to move that to annotations at some point in the future, or where you like say explicitly that nothing escapes from you, or else you need to know the source code.
Or for that matter, you could have a lifetime-based approach. Like hypothetically, you could have a scoped, I'm requesting this target feature, which has a lifetime, and if you run a function inside that uses that target feature, it can't outlive the lifetime of that lease, for example. Yeah, there are ways we could do this, but that would require design in the future that takes into account stuff that may not exist yet. So I would suggest we not worry about it right now.
That would affect a whole bunch of other things as well, like the conversion from closures to function pointers.
Fair point.
We have for a long time had the observation that maybe function pointers should have had a lifetime bound on them, because, for example, with dynamic loading, it would be nice to be able to say, here's a function pointer that's valid, but not forever, because I'm going to unload this library later on. And we can't currently do that. I think it seems analogous, and there may be a mechanism that could be introduced at some point in the future to address both problems.
Yep. Have the syntax be sugar for a type that happens to have a lifetime on it or whatever.
Yeah. I'm just writing down what I said because I hadn't thought about it that way and it seemed useful to me. In a hybrid architecture where CPU features can change, you would have to know whether function and closure pointers escape, and be sure that, and for how long. This may imply new annotations that assure you that they do not escape, or perhaps adding a lifetime annotation. Lifetime annotations could also be useful for dynamic loading unloading scenarios where functions get unloaded. Okay, I'm going to put this comment. This seems like important information that should be recorded, so I'm copying it here in case anyone's coming back to this issue later. Okay, very good. That was really useful. There's these two options: calling methods on generic parameters of const defends and generalized type description. I think I'm inclined to cancel this one. I think we talked about this before. This is a pretty old RFC. I don't know. I'm somewhat inclined to just cancel it and say we're still in favor potentially of, or basically move to postpone the RFC on the basis of this sounds like a good idea. Maybe somebody could pick this up and file an MCP if they're still interested, and we might or might not have bandwidth to do it. But this is stale enough that I think it should be closed. And this current champion is not around, so does anyone disagree with that plan?
That seems reasonable. There's probably smaller chunks that could be bitten off.
Agreed. Yeah. Okay. Let me.
If we could just put types into patterns as a first step or something like that.
Okay. So Nico plans to cancel and move to postpone. In fact, maybe I'll just close as postponed. But encouraging moving to postpone and moving to close always feels a little, I don't know. It's good, makes sense, but also kind of sad. Everybody's got to go check their boxes just to do nothing. Encouraging folks to consider opening an MCP for parts of the proposal and move it forward that way.
That sounds good.
Okay. Let me bring that up here into action item. Okay. I don't know what this calling methods on generic parameters of const defense is. I can't remember. Does anyone remember? I feel like we agreed to this, but in some experimental state or something. I'm not really sure why, like, we can't merge the RFC when, I don't know. Seems like it's in a weird position. It's unusual. We don't normally hold RFCs open while we experiment.
Is that why, or because there's blocking concerns?
It's
I mean,
unfortunate.
the actual reason is that there are blocking concerns.
I was
But
going to say it's unfortunate that Morse isn't on the call at the moment for the discussion of this.
yeah, maybe we'll just defer this discussion. We're doing pretty good. We've almost completely cleared our RFC bot TLang backlog, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
I do want to get to the point where those things. It's not normal to have something on there that's old. We're almost there, which is great. All right, well, maybe we end the meeting here then. Anyone have any final comments?
I have a quick update on move ref pattern, the one where we said it would be nice to see usage in the ecosystem. I just checked a complete search of GitHub. For anybody who hasn't found it yet, grep.app is a great GitHub search. I just checked, and there is no reference to the move ref pattern feature gate anywhere outside of the Rust compiler, the Rust blog announcement, This Week in Rust, and a list of Rust feature gates. So nobody on GitHub has used it at all, as far as I can tell. That doesn't mean nobody's experimented with it, but there's no committed code out there that uses this feature gate.
Okay. Well, good to know.
I'm not proposing that that's a blocker. It's an observation that partly answers the question we had, or I had.
Yep. Maybe leave a comment to that effect, but I personally would still go forward with it just because it's like weird code that we don't need.
I agree.
Kind of blocking things for no particular reason. All right. Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.